Welcome to Season 2 of the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance research, insights, and solutions through in-depth discussions with industry experts. Our goal for Season 2 is to enable our listeners to make smarter decisions based on real-world data and behavioral psychology. Join us for more holistic conversations and discussion about sales compensation and sales force effectiveness that will improve the lives and careers of both current and future sales comp leaders. I'm your host, Nabeil Alazzam. Today, we are honored to welcome Alex Gousinov, the Senior Director of Go-to-Market Planning, Programs, and Sales Compensation at Twilio, where he spearheads global initiatives to drive revenue growth and increase sales productivity. With a remarkable career spanning decades in the high-tech sector, Alex brings a wealth of expertise in go-to-market strategy, sales compensation design, and business transformation. His extensive experience across renowned companies like Twilio, Micro Focus, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and Mercury Interactive positions him as a distinguished leader and a trusted advisor in the field. We're privileged today to engage in a conversation with Alex, a visionary professional shaping the future of sales compensation through data-driven insights and transformative initiatives. Welcome to the show, Alex. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Nabeil. Very excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And before we start, I really want to thank you, Nabeil, and your team for contributing to the sales compensation community. I actually listen to several shows, and every time I listen to every show, I pick something for myself to improve. So really, thanks a lot for driving this.
Well, no, thank you, Alex, for that comment. I think, I started my career in sales compensation, and I imagine no different than most of us in this space. We learn from our colleagues and the people that we work closest with, and it's a tough space. It's not easy. There's a lot of nuance, and instead of trying to solve every problem from scratch, we found this is a great opportunity to kind of bring leaders together and share the experience. And so, the thanks really goes to you and everyone of the other leaders and professionals in the space that have joined the community to support. So, absolutely, no, it's great to have you on and be a part of this discussion. So I'm going to kick it off the way I always do, or on the show, with a broad question of how you got into the world of sales compensation, given it's not usually the thing that people are in high school or in grade school thinking that one day that's what they're going to do, but it's a very interesting and rewarding space to be in. So I'm curious, how did you end up in this space?
Yeah, definitely agree with you that sales compensation it was not my choice when I graduated from school or from college, right? So, and I'm reminding my team every time that sales compensation is what we chose, and so and with all the good, bad, and ugly that we are facing every day. To me, it was a little bit less traditional. Traditional way is that people are coming from sales operations or from finance background. I started my career as a software developer, and then we created a team called customer-oriented R&D, which was the liaison between the R&D and the field. And then I gravitated towards the go-to-market strategy, enablement. And really, when you are part of the go-to-market strategy and planning, so then you realize that sales compensation is one of the key levers that you can use in order to drive go-to-market strategy. And then when I started to engage with sales compensation, sales comp design, so then I was asked to do more and more and more on sales comp. So this is probably the usual way for people that are taking more responsibility. And I like sales compensation. It's sometimes you feel that it's not always great, but I believe that this is a great opportunity to design, build, and operationalize sales compensation plan to really drive the right behavior and support the go-to-market motion.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's interesting because coming from an engineering background and more, science, I believe it's physics. Am I correct in kind of the background that you started with? It's very, to me, it's a very close role in a way that sales compensation is an optimization problem, and it's a multivariate optimization problem, right? You're optimizing for all kinds of things, whether it's where the sales team focuses their energy. When you think about every incentive that I put here is going to take away from activity or motion over here, and how do you constantly align the direction of the sales organization with the overarching strategy? And it's just an optimization problem of where do we allocate these resources. And having that engineering mindset and then having the opportunity to kind of touch all these different stakeholders and all these parts of the business, whether it's HR, finance, sales. I mean, yeah, I'm curious, like, does that align with your, the ups and the positives of being in that sales comp role? Does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're absolutely correct, right? There are multiple degrees of freedom, and you need to drive the optimization exercise here. What's really important is that you define what you're solving for, right? What's the right go-to-market motion? What are the company objectives, both financial and inspirational and operational objectives, right? And so you would work with the sales leaders, with the finance leaders, with the operations leader, really to define those big boulders, right? And once those big boulders are defined, so then you put some specifics around sales compensation plan, right? How do you drive the right behavior? How do you make it simple for to understand? How we make sure that we can really operationalize and provide visibility out to everyone, right? So those are key things that you need to take into account, and you cannot do it alone. You absolutely have to connect with the finance, with sales, interview reps, work with the management, really to be the right partners, and to sometimes to be like a sponge when you take all the information from everyone and try to distill this down and in order to build sales comp.
Yeah, 100%. And so when you think about that transition that you made into the world of sales comp, I guess what was like one of the biggest, again, having been close in the background to the go-to-market strategy and operations in that first transition, and then the final transition to getting closer and closer to the design of incentives, were there any kind of surprising insights or lessons learned?
So the first surprise is that sales compensation actually works, right? So that's that really drives the behavior. And then when you make some changes or pull some specific triggers, be it sales comp design or spiff design or anything, you see the change. So that's really important. And how you really drive the alignment, it's absolutely critical, right? Since if you cannot define routes to market, if you cannot define sales roles effectively, so then you won't be able to build those compensation plans, right? So this is really, really important, and this is what's really important for me, when it's also the opportunity, really, as I mentioned, to work with multiple stakeholders and drivers. And then the additional point, which is really, really important, is the power of data and insights and the analytics. And we can talk about this more later, but that's it's not only the qualitative analysis that you need to do. You can and you should do more quantitative analysis, and this is when our engineering backgrounds actually help.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I have a ton more to dig in there, obviously, as we dive into the show. But that point on the first surprise of incentives actually work. I mean, that point resonates so much with me, because when I first entered, same thing. It's you make a change to a comp plan and how quickly you start to see the shifts in behavior. I mean, this is, it's actually a really compelling argument for us using more data earlier in the sales process, right? I think like that's kind of one of the things that I've always seen as a gap is sales comp. We're so close to the outcome data because the data needs to be 100% accurate, right? To calculate pay. So we're always working with the final financial records. We're working with the latest HR records, et cetera, et cetera. All this data that's kind of on the tail end that's finalized to process for payouts. But the fact is, the moment that you roll out that comp plan, if it's well understood, which we can talk about that as well, if it's well understood, those incentives drive behaviors that are seen in the earliest stages of a sales process in terms of the speed of how opportunities make it through the funnel, the types of opportunities that make it through the funnel, the types of discussions that are being had. So yeah, I'm curious on that. Like, given that you viscerally felt that at the very beginning of kind of your entrance in the career, how has it shifted the way that you think about designing incentives and how you expect it to create a behavior shift in the field?
Yeah. So there are several things to take into account. So one of them, as I mentioned, it's designing incentive as a collaborative effort. So you really want to make sure that you communicate and get the feedback and work closely with the leadership, finance, sales, and so forth. And by the end of the day, it's really important, since when you design the plans, there should be our plans and not my plan, right? So that's really, really important. And then when you work with the sales team, so then they become champions. They can help to sell those plans to their organizations to drive really the change management. The second is, as you mentioned, that's the power of data. How do you run multiple scenarios, right? And running multiple scenarios, it's not only the costing of the plan, which is really important, but really, do we believe that those plans are going to impact either this specific product or that specific initiative, right? So, and this is why it's important to define those initiatives, right? I want to run this product more, or I want to go introduce self-service, right? So how do you define this self-service? So yeah, so the power of data, the analysis of the data, multiple scenarios that you can do with the data. It's really important. And then you connect the dots around have multiple scenarios, see what the outcome might be if the company exceeds the targets, of company achieves the targets, of company maybe a little bit less of the targets. So what are the outcomes, right? So then, and then you can really build those plans based on all the information.
Yeah, 100%. I think to your first point, the collaboration with all the different stakeholders and getting them to buy in. I mean, the sales team has to believe for the incentive to actually drive a result. The sales team themselves has to believe that by doing X, they will actually see that Y reward. And there's no better way to do that than to have the sales organization bought in to that incentive structure.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And this interconnects, since once you have the data, once you have the insight, you actually earn your seat at the table.
Yes.
You work with the sales organization to enable them and to recommend several options, right? And when they realize that it's actually can drive the sales behavior, not only it's absolutely critical to pay people correctly and on time, right? Don't get me wrong on this. But I believe the value of the sales compensation is to drive the right behavior, and really you have to do it together, and you have to do it based on the data.
Yeah, you have to, 100%. And I think there's an element of you and I've talked about this before, but that earning your seat at the table to bring the data-driven insights is critical, and it doesn't happen right away, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but in my career in sales compensation, there's a lot of times where sales leaders, they're very close to their team. They understand what's happening from their organization. They're close to the sales process. They're close to the customer, and it takes a lot to convince them otherwise. And as a new sales comp leader, it's very difficult to potentially sometimes broach that if you don't do it the right way. And you had such a good way of articulating kind of the ability to buy the credibility and the rights to be able to have those discussions. Yeah, would love to maybe have you elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if you once we define what are the big boulders, all right, so then we can look at this. Those should be the sales roles. Those should be the plans, right? Why do we want to push define accelerators for the primary quota carriers this way or not that way, right? Why do we recommend to working with the strategy and the sales compensation that we would define strategic account executive versus new business account executive and build them different plans, right? How do we define that CSMs and the renewals AE and the AEs are working together? What are the rules of engagement and how we build a sales compensation plan? So those are the areas that with the information we have, and with the data we have, with the history we have, we actually can analyze and we can recommend the several options and come up with the preferable option from based on our perspective to the sales leaders. By the end of the day, it's their call to make, but when we come with the data and we come with the recommendations, when we establish this trust already, they will be more likely to listen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think you kind of, as in sales comp, you have access to all this data, you have access to all this insights, to your point. If you can package it up into these bite-size, nuggets, it gives you the credibility to come in, have that discussion with the sales leader, and really kind of shape that transformative shift that, in whatever ways that you're gonna update or adjust the sales comp incentives or even in some cases, I mean, like the conversation is to your point, the roles, the territories, the customer sales process, like all of that is a funnel into how you think about design of incentives. And sometimes we may notice data down here at the incentive plan level that really is an indicator that there's something up here that needs to be fixed. Not sales comp, but rather, the roles, the definition of territories, the balancing of how we manage and handle the capacity of the sales force. I mean, these are all things that could be lessons gleaned from the data that we see down in our sales comp process.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I will make your statement even stronger. You will not be able to be successful if you are isolated. If someone just designed the quotas and hands you a quotas and you build amazing sales compensation plans, but the quota are off, you will be paying significantly lower or significantly higher than you expected, right?
Yeah.
And you won't be able to really to achieve the goals that you wanted to achieve, right? So how the sales roles are defined, how the territory are defined, how the quotas are set, and how the sales compensations are built and operationalized, right? And how do we provide visibility and how we execute this effectively? This should be really a collaborative effort.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's, I heard this, and I'm now not going to attribute to the correct person, but I heard this recently, and it's all rivers flow into sales comp, right? Your territory, your capacity planning, your roles, your channels for sales, all of these things funnel in. And if you are isolated, if you're not connected to the reasons, the whys behind all these things, you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to actually pay for performance, right? That's the benefit of sales comp, is that you're paying for performance. But if you don't understand what good performance looks like, if you don't understand the why, it's very difficult to create a plan that actually is well aligned to that.
Yes, so we are lost in the food chain. In order for us to work, we need to have multiple things to be connected together. I talk about the quotas, I talk about the objectives, the role definitions, and then obviously the data. If the data is incorrect, either metadata or the actual transactional data, if this data is incorrect, you won't be able to pay correctness. So in order for us to be successful when we are lost in the food chain, we need to work together.
Yeah, 100%. And so, again, spanning all the different organizations and the career that you've had, how have you found it best to get close to the strategy and be aligned with all the upstream functions that are supporting the inputs into sales comp?
Yes. So one part of my role currently is running the actual planning. So when the annual planning cycle, or whatever, you can call it continuous planning, but we're trying to do annual planning, right? So when you build the annual planning cycle, you define those work streams of the big boulder work stream, the territory and quota management, the sales compensation, the change management enablement. You define them up front, and then you want to make sure that people are driving their work stream, but they are connecting together. We'll define what are the dependencies, what are the risks, and then on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, you bring those people together so they can collaborate and work together, right? And that's really, really, really important. Since otherwise, you want to build a car and you will end up with a bicycle, right? So that's that's really important. So if I look at the sales compensation work streams, so dependency on the data, dependency on the strategy, dependency on the on the sales roles, right? Those are key dependencies that we identify up front, and we put them on a Gantt on the and really we can drive the overall planning, so we can build those things together.
And when do you think, from a timing perspective, is the best time to start planning for the next year?
So it a little bit depends on how big the change is, right? Yep. And also what is your planning process, right? So let's assume that you have for your financial year is aligned with the calendar. So you want to roll out the plans in January, ideally, at the beginning of January or at the sales kickoff, second or third week of January. I would say that I would start thinking about the new plans maybe after the end of Q2 when I have the data. So it's probably around July, August timeframe when you really need to start thinking about what are the big boulders, what we need to change, and then really define the plan and so forth. So sometimes you can do it maybe a little bit later, but not that much late. So it's a little bit of the trade-off, since you would like to see the actual results for Q3 and for Q4, but if you just wait for Q3 and Q4 actual results without building stuff, you just will miss the boat.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's never any harm in kind of establishing the kickoff and the discussions well in advance. We always describe this, and I've mentioned this in other discussions, but it's the way that we think about it is no different than product management. It's like there's this concept of the cone of uncertainty. So the further you go out, the more uncertain the potential outcomes could be, because there's way more variability. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't start earlier and recognize that there may be more variations, there may be a shift, maybe results come back at the end of Q3 and it tells us there's a very different data point that we need to focus on. I'm curious though, with when you think about the planning cycle, are there any other factors that are trigger based? So I'll give you an example. Maybe a big one is the company just made an acquisition. So now you almost have to factor that into the change it has to the go-to-market and ultimately sales comp. But is there anything else that you think about that's trigger based that you are looking to get ahead of if you ever see come up?
So definitely the M&A activities of either acquisition or divestitures, this is a little bit tricky, and it's interesting. When I started with the planning, someone wise told me, expect the unexpected. So that's really important here. But you definitely need to look at this from what are the shift in either in the company strategy or the market, right? So for example, if you are putting much more focus on profitability versus growth at all costs, right? So then you need to take this into account, right? If you want to put different routes to market, want to go more indirect versus direct, or do you want to go more through self-service? So that's really important. So it's not just the trigger focused, but it's more the company strategy is changing, right? So shifting, right? And then, for example, you might have a product that is either struggling or the other way around. Now, if you have one of the products that it's really taking off and you want to adjust your compensation plan, or you want to put much more focus on new logos versus the existing business, right? So not everything is trigger based, but everything of this sort, this is the discussion of the big boulders and the definition of the big boulders that you need to align. And then when we do the planning, we hope that the acquisition doesn't happen on December 31st.
Yeah, exactly. You have a little bit of a heads up before, but I think there's a lot of great examples that you gave there. And the larger the organization, I think this is what makes sales comp so difficult. The larger the organization, the more often these types of changes will occur, right? Because the bigger your product portfolio, the more geos that you support, the more likelihood for market events, product growth or declines, et cetera, et cetera. And so how or what are you doing to ensure that your team, which is, again, the very end, and I think about like in sales compensation, with a final step. I mean, obviously you own planning as well, so it's kind of, this makes it a little bit easier. But if you think about kind of like the team members or the leaders and the professionals that are listening into this show today, when they're owning just this piece, which is the final piece of the puzzle, how do they make sure that they're kind of aware of these discussions that are happening far upstream? Right? Maybe it's not about an acquisition, which is very, confidential and usually only shared, when it's time. But there are things where, discussions on product strategy and long-term objectives are something, things that you could probably get headquarters of if you're actually talking to the right stakeholders and getting looped in. So I'm curious how you think about that.
So first, you absolutely need to understand those. It depends what information you are working with, right? If you look at this just from the sales comp perspective, so I really want to see what is going to change next year. So this is the key things, right? So it's maybe a little bit less important for me the 5 or 10 year long-term plan as the sales compensation professional, but to your point, if we run a planning cycle, so then we need to define those big boulders up front and to have our executives to sign in blood, if you will, on those big boulders. Obviously, things might change, but you need to be very clear, and this is part of the planning role, is that if you have last minute change, there will be implications. Where
yes.
you need to delay the rollout, or we will need to make some specific adjustments. So this is the alignment that we need to have. And then the definition of those are the key go-to-market objectives we absolutely need. It's up front, so then we can build the plans, right? So yeah, it's I don't, especially with the larger the organization is very large, you don't expect sales compensation lead to talk to each and every product manager, but you really need to have a visibility into the set of whatever 5 key objectives that we need to drive. And then once you have the visibility and the alignment on those objectives, then you can go to a specific product manager or a channel lead or a regional lead to really align on the details.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's almost whatever the go-to-market planning is, both in the kind of like the longer term, kind of 2-3 year vision out versus kind of like the next 12 months. It's almost like if you tap into that and get a sense of where the go-to-market organization is going, instead of trying to kind of capture the surface area of everything that could funnel up, you're likely to be much more productive at kind of getting ahead of it. But no matter what, it's kind of setting the SLA when you're doing that planning cycle of, these are the things that we're going to tackle. And if there's a deviation, then we may have to deviate the expected outcome, timelines, et cetera, et cetera. Because I mean, to your point, an acquisition comes in December 31st. I mean, there's a cost there, and we either are going to roll out a comp plan that will likely get disrupted within 2 to 3 months, or maybe we're just better off delaying the rollout by 2 to 3 months to capture the new product. And we have to make the decision of the cons and pros of one option versus the other.
Yeah, definitely. There are several confidential things like acquisitions or headcount adjustments that you not always can plan for, right? But the alignment with the go-to-market strategy and the big boulders, you really can. And on the sales website, what we've done historically, so once we aligned we understood those big boulders, so then we actually say, okay, this is what it means for the sales call. Define what are the A, B, C, D, this is what we're planning to do, right? And then you go to the leaders and you want to make sure that you are aligning with the leaders that this is what we are solving with sales call, right? So,
yes.
So once we have this, so then the rest is nothing. It's easy, but the rest is a little bit easier, right? So we can define the excellence point, we can define the specifics of each role and so forth, but the alignment with the 12 months, the priorities for the 12 months are absolutely critical.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yes, the sales team's inputs should 100% be purely, this is what we're looking to achieve, not here's the incentive structure or here's the incentive we want to roll out. Because that is effectively the translation layer is the expertise of sales comp and actually optimizing for the right incentives to drive that outcome. I think you need their buy-in on the tail end, which maybe kind of feeds into the next piece of like, how do you now roll this out? So you go through the planning cycle and how do you roll it out and get the reps and the sellers to understand the new incentives and the structures, but also be fully engaged.
Yeah. Sometimes you have a tendency of sales leaders to try to develop their own plans, and some of them have more experience than others in doing this. But to the previous point, when you build the trust, when you build the partnership, so there will be much more likely that they will defer to you to actually to build the comp plans based on their objectives rather than them trying to do it on their own.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious when it comes to the financial, the financial aspect of, incentives. It's compensation, it's someone's pay, and so the bigger the change that you make in that year-over-year shift, the bigger the boulder that you're trying to tackle, the more disruptive the change to and the potential financial impact to each seller or the organization. So again, like how do you prepare and preface for that?
Yeah, so there are definitely several things that you can. One of them is to plan up front, right? So when you actually come up with some hypotheses, so run them by the data you have, right? By the, let's say, distribution this year, and what you will be able to see is the deltas, right? So what you're aiming for, right? So for example, if the company achieves 100%, you are aiming for, let's say, payout 115%, and you want, let's say, 2/3 of your organization to be at 80% or more, for example, right? So you can run different scenarios in the distribution, and then if you go to those scenarios, you will be able to see specifically by role what does it mean, what does it entail, right? So if you feel, for example, you do the scenario and then you say, okay, I have our strategic keys that are focusing on protecting and growing the existing business. If I change their plans significantly, I see that on average they will be compensated less, assuming we have reasonable quotas. And then this is the discussion that we need to have, right? So do we want to reduce targets in order to compensate them effectively? Or do we want to maybe come up with different mechanisms? For example, do you want to pay them differently on, let's say, professional services or new logos, right? So you have different levers that you can pull once you have the analysis. And this is a little bit tricky when some sales compensation professionals are struggling. And sales comp professionals, many of them are coming from operational finance background, when you have to be 100% correct.
Yeah.
When you do the planning, this type of planning and the analysis, it's okay to be 95% correct. You won't be able to be 100% correct.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's more probabilistic outcomes that you're in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then if you can do it kind of 90-10 and come up with this is what we can do based on those degrees of freedom that we have, that this can really guide your compensation design for this.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think there's an element of these hypotheses are really sensitivity analysis to some extent, right? Okay, we're going to roll up this incentive. We're hypothesizing it's going to produce a 15% incremental growth of this product. But at what cost? We assume it's going to take away effort from here, but it's only going to reduce it by 5%. Okay, in this case, is that the outcome that we'd be okay with? Or do we only go down this path if we are very confident it's going to increase by 20%? And now it kind of gives you the sensitivity of, this is what potential outcomes look like and how much we're willing to pay. I mean, it's funny because I don't think, I never thought about that element of the type of profile that is in the average sales comp seat, having that mentality of kind of getting it perfect, being something, but I could definitely resonate and understand that could be a barrier to kind of this element of, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to, like, at a high level, understand, kind of set the estimates. Then after you kind of land on the final one or two options, then you should go and really stress test to make sure that when you throw all the potential possible outcomes, you're not going to get a distribution of attainment that could all of a sudden create a 20% over budget type of impact, because sales comp is one of the largest cost centers, and there is an element of, like, if you really mess up the design, that could be risky. But I think the earlier you are in the budgeting and planning cycle, the faster you want to iterate on modeling.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit of a trade-off, since as we mentioned, we would start the overall planning, let's say, after Q2 ends, but you cannot do this detailed exercise in August. You need to have at least 3/4 of the data, ideally, and have some forecast for Q4 in order to do the detailed analysis. But to your point, in order to get us from infinite number of options to 2 or 3 options, this is what we can do between, let's say, August and October, and then we can define, come up with all the sensitivity analysis of the two options to pick one of them based on the data that we have.
So, you just touched on kind of the approach should be fast, iterative, quick hypothesis testing earlier on, and then as you get more data, as you get closer to the kind of final 2 options, you're narrowing down your focus. I think when you think about taking all this analysis and these hypotheses and then rolling it out with the sales leaders and eventually the sales reps, are you sharing some of these assumptions? Like, how is that part of the communication to get the reps to understand how they're going to win in this new plan?
So there are a couple of things that I would mention. So definitely, when we build the comp design, we will share this the assumption and the data with the sales leaders, with the decision makers. So that's absolutely critical. When we operationalize those plans, we would come up with the set of dashboards that we can actually track the performance distribution by role, by region, by metric, and all of that stuff that we would share with the leaders and the second line managers to actually to really help them to understand how they are doing. I want to be a little bit careful that I would not share complaints with the reps before the year starts, since it might drive the a little bit tricky behavior. With that said, what we done historically and worked pretty well with us, we built a sales advisory council. So we went to the leaders and managers and we say, okay, nominate key champions that are sales reps or FLMs that are trusted, and then we can communicate with maybe a little bit more openly, and then they work with us to build or test our assumption on the comp plan. And then when we roll out the plan, those folks, they're really becoming the champions to help us to go through the change management process.
Yeah.
And then in terms of how deep do you want to go in terms of sharing the information, so it a little bit depends. Sometimes you do share, sometimes you say, those are the assumptions, right? But you don't want to be in the situation that you end up with so many different escalations that if you share maybe a little bit too much, right? For example, if you build your target based on the historical territory performance and a rep has 200 accounts, so then you don't want reps to complain about the assumption for each and every account on what are the growth perspectives. The same goes with the sales compensation design for specific roles. So you want to be a little bit careful that you don't put too much burden on the operations teams.
Yeah, 100%. I think, on your first point, like the getting the buy-in from like sales or advisory council or effectively kind of the champions within the sales organization that'll kind of take it to the organization as influencers. I heard something interesting. Someone else on the show mentioned was that they, at the sales kickoff, when they were describing the comp plan, they actually had a rep that basically performed the best or among the best in the previous years and maximized the comp plan historically, stand up and share how they were going to approach this year's comp plan. And I thought that was it's a kind of a very, very, very tactical kind of exercise, because you effectively, when you're designing a comp plan, you want the comp plan to be gamed, and when gamed, produce the desired outcome that we want, right? So you want the rep to be like, okay, how do I maximize my earnings on every deal? Well, I do X, Y, and Z. Okay, perfect. That's exactly what we wanted you to do. You want increase term length, maximize commit, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can get the rep that actually thinks that way to be the one to communicate to the sellers, to be like, this is what I did to make a ton of money last year, and I drove results for the business that mattered. And now I'm looking at this new plan, and I'm actually approaching it in a way that's going to help me maximize my earnings this year. To me, I'm like, it's just such a simple thing, but it can resonate so well with the sales organization and broadly. So yeah, I think that point resonates with me a lot. And I think it's a common theme that I've seen work very well when talking with different sales comp leaders.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that you ideally, and if you have a enterprise team versus the mid-market versus commercial, you might want to pick maybe more than one rep to speak. But this, what you described, is the most powerful way to actually to make sure that the sales organization actually listens. They spend time to really understand the plan, and then to your point, if they can game the plan to drive amazing results, so then our job is done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's the faster you get the sales team to understand what they need to do, like the faster you can get to those results. I mean, there was one of our panels that we did recently where we showed some of the results from the showdown, where from sales leaders relative to what sales comp leaders think. And one of the interesting discussions that came up is kind of like quizzing or understanding how reps understand their comp plan. And so I'm curious to get your perspective on this. But for me, if we think about kind of understanding the comp plan and we have sessions or office hours when we kick off the year with the sellers to understand if, okay, do they actually understand the plan? Does our sales advisory council understand it? But it's almost like having them do whether it's a multiple choice or kind of a ranking of here's 5 activities. How are you going to prioritize them now based off of your new comp plan? And there is a right answer, which is aligned to maximizing your comp, and there's a wrong answer. And almost from that, you should be able to tell if the reps fully understand the plan yet or not. And I'm curious, like how, one, if that resonates, or two, if you do something else to make sure that the sellers in your organization actually understand the plan when you're rolling it out.
Yeah, so does it resonate? Yeah, absolutely, it does resonate. And when it's I like the approach, right? So you look at this not just the kind of do you understand the plan, and is it if you achieve 120%, how much are you're going to get paid? But really, would you prioritize this product or this new logo, or would you go for the, let's say, 2-year contract instead of 1-year contract based on the comp plan? So that's nice. You want to be maybe a little bit careful, since not every rep will have 5-year contracts in the making of multi-million dollars, right? But it would resonate. In terms of rolling the comp plans, so first you need to plan for the rollout. Rollout is part of the planning, and you absolutely have to nail it, right? So that's really, really important. What we've done, beginning of the year, when we are even before the sales kickoff, we would maybe record a kind of teaser video, if you will, as something relatively small, saying that those are the key things that we are going to address with the sales comp plans, and so then stay tuned for more information. And then we follow up with the detailed plans and so forth, and so on, both in terms of the plan documents and more enablement and office hours and so forth. And then to your point is playing this maybe in terms of you have a discussion between sales reps and the sales manager, and of 2 people that are, one of them is playing a role of a sales manager, another one is playing a role of the sales rep, and they can talk about the comp plans. So when sales reps, let's say, complains to sales manager, I'm not making enough money, right? Or what's going on? And sales manager can explain what are the key things in the comp plan that actually can help.
I like that too. Yeah. I feel like, you almost, it's funny because it's like the less time you spend on it, the more you lose out, because it is a big part of, it's again, back to the very first point to kick off the conversation of this biggest surprise is how well incentives work. And if, reps don't fully understand exactly what they need to do to capture that opportunity. And so it's like, you do want to make it a big part of a sales kickoff, of explaining kind of any new strategy that you're rolling out.
Yeah, exactly. And my advice to the sales compensation leaders, so don't jump too fast into details, right? So start really with what are the go-to-market objectives, how the sales compensation plan are addressing those go-to-market objectives, what are the sales roles, and then what are the comp plans by the sales roles and all the incentives and so forth. So do it in a little bit more structured way, since if you start with the enablement, and I've seen some of the comp enablement when people are, you will have 2.5x accelerator. So that's good. That kind of is how this is going to address the objective, and why did we do this? So that's really important.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's telling the narrative that aligns very well with like the overarching sales narrative, sales strategy narrative, and bridging that gap. And it's kind of the why and then the how. Um, yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I agree fully. Um, so I'm curious, just kind of, I know we spent a lot of time on the planning and kind of all the way through to kind of the rollout. Is there anything outside of, planning and just kind of the ongoing piece that you'd like to share as kind of a lesson learned advice to the audience learning, like things that kind of really resonate with you as kind of being very impactful things that you've been able to do over your career and your experience?
Yeah, definitely. So maybe a couple of points to mention. So and we touched on some of them. So start early, be collaborative, define big objectives or big boulders up front. Don't underestimate the importance of the change management and the enablement. As we mentioned, expect the unexpected. So you cannot really expect the unexpected, but you can say, okay, some decisions should be made before X date, otherwise it will be impacted. Or you can say, I'm okay to come up with some buffers, and let's say if the Q4 results are 5% more than we expected, so then we need to make the adjustments. If they are inside those 5%, we will know, right? So that's really important. And one thing that we didn't spend a lot of time on during this conversation, but it's really, really important, is in order for you to do effective planning, you need to take all the data from that you have, and in order to have this data, you when you operationalize the plan, so use this data, build the dashboards, track the performance. If you can do it close to real time, it's perfect. If not, at least provide visibility once a month, and this will help you to build the credibility. This will even help you to make some adjustments if you need to during the year, like designing a new SPIF, for example, or adjusting targets and so forth. But this information will be crucial when you build the new plans and the overall new planning cycle as well. So invest really in the building those dashboards, insights, and providing this both to the sales team and to the operations team.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love all three points, and I think that last one is so true because it's that data that's going to arm you to have the right conversations with the sales leaders to bring you closer to that planning cycle, and ultimately just make the entire planning process more effective. Because in theory, as you kind of start early, you're going to have some data, and as you keep on going, that data is going to either validate or invalidate the things that you need to do. So couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and you and the team is familiar with the data, right? Since, for example, you had the let's say CSMs on the plan first time, let's say this particular year. So next year you need to decide, do you want to put CSM on the plans or do you want to make the adjustments? So if you are familiar with the data and you understand what was going on during the year, those decisions will be much, much easier for you.
Yeah. No, agreed. I think these are things that after you've done this for a while, it's very clear like how you need to approach it. But again, for those that are just starting out and kind of taking on kind of that next stage of ownership of a sales comp function, I think it's very, 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 very valuable insights. I just wanted, again, Alex, I can't say this enough. Thank you for joining today and for the discussions. It's always a pleasure chatting and diving into this. Before we wrap up, I guess I asked this question for everyone that joins the show. Are there any resources, whether it be books or any other forms of content that you found tremendously helpful in your sales comp career?
Yeah, there are several. Definitely, be familiar with the foundation of the sales compensation. So, and you, I believe, mentioned on the show previously the great book of Andre Zoltner's of how to define sales comp incentives. So that's a great book. But then you need, as a sales compensation professional, if you really want to be effective and if you want to grow your career, you want to both be part of the community and the forums, and listen to the shows like yours, Nabeil, and be contributing to the community. It's really important. And what's important is enhance your horizon, better understand not only the sales call, but the overall go-to-market, the sales design. What are the sales roles? What are the trends in the industry related to the go-to-markets? This actually will help you to have a little bit bigger picture when you work with the sales leaders, when you work with the finance leaders, or with the operations leaders, to really build your plans. And as I mentioned, it also will help you to grow your career if you want to extend your scope, in addition to sales compensation to other areas.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like it's all domain knowledge that feeds into sales comp, and so the broader you can be, certainly, the better. I mean, and also I agree with the kind of the foundational knowledge. Although some of those books are definitely drier reads, so it's not. It's definitely more theoretical and practical, but it's tremendously helpful if you kind of get from a foundational learning perspective.
Yeah. And if you are new to sales comp, if you read the book and you get 55% of what's written there, it's still okay, right?
Exactly.
And then based on your experience and finding a good mentor and working as a team, you can get more, right? And yes, some of the areas that you will face as a sales comp professional will not be in the book, but this is actually what makes it fun and exciting.
Yeah, 100%. I just can't. Just want to reiterate. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining and sharing your experience and expertise with the broader audience.
And Bill, thanks a lot for having me. And again, thanks a lot to you and your team for doing this amazing job and in driving driving the sales compensation community and providing this knowledge and those insights to the sales compensation professional. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Sales Compensation Show is brought to you by Forma AI, the first sales compensation platform designed around the agile methodology of CompOps. To learn more about how Forma AI can help design, execute, and optimize your sales comp strategy, visit forma.ai. Find us by searching for Sales Compensation on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. On behalf of the team here at Forma AI, thanks for listening.